it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I'm going to talk about pretentious people. Okay, no, not really, but I do want to talk a little bit about minimalism versus laziness in game design. So if you have ever played games like, for example, Limbo or Monument Valley, even from the App Store, or other games like Portal, you have played a minimalist game. So I want to talk today about why you might want to make one of those types of games, or more specifically what goes into creating one, and then finally if they do actually take less time to produce. The general consensus that I've come across while researching this on the internet and seeing other game designers talk to each other is that good minimalist games absolutely can take less time to produce, but there are some caveats to that, which I will get into in that last part. But if you do like these kinds of games like I do and want to see more about them, please leave a like down below, and it will make me fall madly in love with your dog. But don't worry, I'm not going to take him away from you. I'll just admire him from afar as I slowly drive myself towards separation anxiety-induced madness. I'm sorry I wasn't a better husband, Spot. That was weird. Alright, so first I'll say that I don't think there's any bad reason to make a minimalist game. If you hate the aesthetic, or find them somewhat pretentious, there might still be a use to making games in this way, at the very least for practice. But for me, I absolutely love this aesthetic. And a big trend that I've seen since I started Littlebigplanet 1 is the silhouette game. And that's an aesthetic that you can see in quite a few other games too. Limbo is the obvious one I mentioned before, but I do remember quite a few games on Xbox Live Arcade circa 2007 that use this aesthetic too, and it's gorgeous. But a big reason why these smaller indie games go for this type of style, and a big reason that I do as well, has to do with production time. It definitely takes a while to come up with a unique aesthetic for a game, and possibly more initial time when you're making a minimalist game because you have a lot less to choose with. But once you do choose those, creating assets and characters is pretty easy. This is why a lot of indie game developers choose this type of game, because they might have a great idea for a game, but they have nowhere near the manpower of like EA Games or Capcom to make hyper-realistic or super detailed games. I can totally vouch for this one myself, because one of my most popular levels is called Gravicolor, which I mention pretty frequently because it's really fun. But that's a minimalist level that uses this aesthetic. I thought of an interesting gameplay mechanic, and I wanted to give it an arcade style, like look like an arcade, so this aesthetic to me made sense, but I'll be honest, it also gave me a lot of freedom to focus on level mechanics and to create more technically complicated obstacles. It still took an inordinate amount of time to, practice and get the flow of the game just right, and I can say that I only had time to spend on that flow because I was able to spend less time on asset creation. So yeah, looks are cool and it takes less time. So let me tell you the specifics of how to go into a game like this. So for one, a simpler color palette is what you want to start with. Whether you make it black or white, or in Littlebigplanet using only one material or a certain set of materials, you want to keep that simple. But simpler materials doesn't mean less material. In game design or art in general, it doesn't matter if you're using simple or complex techniques or colors, you need to fill the canvas. In college, one of my art professors commented quite often on blank space, and no, not the Taylor Swift song, the space that lacks any sort of brush strokes or anything like that. So in game design, this is the space that lacks any assets or any terrain or any characters. Just blank. Didn't think I needed to go that far into it, but hey, there we go. So as the most inexperienced kid in class, she constantly told me to spend time filling in this space with just something, anything. I was probably just being lazy, but when we started with all of these, minimal pieces at the beginning of the semester that were just meant to be made of dots or parallel lines, it felt weird to put hours into filling this space with easy BS that wasn't really going to turn into any sort of art piece. But when all the kids that were in the class showed me what they'd done, it was seriously incredible what they were able to do with, only dots. Obviously, they were more experienced than me, but when I did start focusing more and forcing myself to fill the dang canvas, I was forcing myself to get more creative with what I filled it with. Long story short, even if you're using just one material, fill that canvas. You never want the majority of the screen to be blank space or borders, because nothingness is just boring. Likewise, if there is blank space, make sure there is a reason for that to be there. And again, if there's too much, try to think of something to fill it with. Now with all of this, it may sound a little bit more effort to create a minimalist level, but personally I end up spending just as much time on this sort of level as I would on any other, so that kind of makes sense to me. I know it's not a definitive answer, but the real answer to this big question is that it depends. Minimalist levels can take less time to make, but with less visuals, you also have to make sure that the gameplay is independently interesting enough for the player who might get bored of the visuals. Still, there is something very beautiful about minimal aesthetics, so it really can be a minimal game in a gameplay as well. I mean, puzzle games do this sort of thing pretty beautifully. They're not mechanically intensive to make or to play, but they are smart. Portal and, like I said, Monument Valley do this very, very well. And they're serious. Some of the most minimal games out there are just completely serious games. Hell, Portal takes most of its assets from the Half-Life engine, and I mean, it takes all of its engine from Half-Life, but I guess what I'm really trying to say is that minimalist levels have a place in video games in general, and if that sort of thing appeals to you, for any reason of that I mentioned here, just go for it. Minimal art and modern art do definitely get a bad rap for being, pretentious and kind of simple, but these sorts of games are almost always praised by mainstream media, and honestly, if you have a great idea for a game, but kind of struggle with the whole creating and maintaining an aesthetic, I say go for it. Make something weird and simple. If the idea is interesting enough, or if the gameplay flows well, you're gonna make a great level or a great game. Alright, well, yeah, that's all for today. This minimal video on minimalism. So you see what I did there? Anyways, if you do like or dislike these sorts of levels, let me know in the comments down below. I love talking about these types of things in different types of games. But if you like this sort of video, leave a like down below, and definitely consider subscribing if you want to see more of all of this stuff. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. And goodbye for now. Oh, choking on my own spit. Cool. Well, my camera's gonna die, so I can't record this again. Guess that's how I say goodbye. Goodbye!